Hi everyone, I'm Nicole Oman, and I wanted to come online today and wish everybody a happy Father's Day. I wanted to come on and share my personal story of a great healing I had with my father because I didn't have the greatest relationship with my dad growing up. It was a rocky relationship, and I wanted to share that story with you and dedicate this video to all the people out there who had a rough relationship in their childhood with their dads. And I wanted to dedicate this video to my own father and let him know that I love him and that I honor your process, Dad, and the process we had together. Now, because of my story, I believe in the existence of miracles. It's not because I saw water turned into wine, but because I witnessed a miraculous healing in my own life. Me and my dad had a rough relationship. He had a substance abuse problem when I was a child, and I also witnessed a lot of domestic violence, mainly towards my mother. But I witnessed that, and it affected me. It affected my foundation, and it affected a lot of the way I showed up in relationships in my own life. And 6 years ago, right before I got married, I was invited to a ayahuasca ceremony. So if you don't know what ayahuasca is, it's a shamanic medicine that usually comes out of Peru, the Amazon jungle, and it's a very old tradition. It's a hallucinogenic medicine, but this is not something that you drink and you go party with. It's held in a very ceremonious structure. This medicine should only be used in that way, and I say that with great sincerity because it has so much healing properties to it if used in the right way. And I was invited to an ayahuasca ceremony, and my mentor at the time advised me to set the intention for this ceremony to heal the relationship with my father. And I knew that I had to do this because as I got married and I was being given away to my husband, that I wanted to show up as a woman, as a wife. I had been in my relationship for 5 years prior, and throughout our relationship, I had this realization that because of what I witnessed in my childhood, I would punish my relationships now. I would start fights and I would try to get him to a place where he would blow up at me because I thought that's the way that love was expressed. And I knew that at that moment that was unhealthy and I couldn't do it anymore. So I entered the ceremony, and this ceremony happened to be a really rocky ceremony. A lot of people were going into really deep process. And the ceremony lasts all night and into the morning. So I ended up having to hold space for most of the people throughout the night and help them and take care of them. So in the morning, as the sun started to peek over the horizon, and I was laying down in this little teepee, I heard a voice in my head, and it said, "Okay, it's your turn." And my heart started to flutter, and I was really nervous, but I knew that it was time for me to have my deep healing. So I sat up, and the voice advised me to find an anchor, a man in the room that anchored in what I wanted that father energy to be like for me. So I looked around the room, and there was the leader of the ceremony, Scott, who I know, who's a dear friend of mine. And he was tending to the fire. And one of the reasons why we had such a rocky ceremony that night is because we were in this teepee, and they had to feed the fire all night long, because if we put too big of logs, it would smoke up the teepee and everybody had to leave. So Scott decided that he had to feed the fire with small sticks all night long. And there he was, exhausted, just feeding the fire devoutly, so all of us could have the most stable ceremony. And I thought how beautiful this man was to take care of us in such a beautiful and diligent way. So I anchored into this loving, nurturing energy. And all of a sudden, I felt the floor drop out from underneath me. And as this floor dropped out, I was scared. I was fearful. I felt like I needed to grasp. But all of a sudden, I felt these two large hands come underneath me and catch me. And I heard this voice. It was a deep, nurturing, loving voice, as all I could describe as the Divine Father. And it said, "It's okay. I got you. Give it all to me." And as I heard this voice, all this sadness started to build up, and I started to weep uncontrollably, and cry out this lifetime and lifetimes of sadness that was stuck inside of my body. And I cried and I cried and I cried, and I cried for what it seemed like an eternity. And time stopped, and I wept. And all of a sudden, the weeping stopped, and silence appeared. And I felt safe and held and loved. And then I felt this joy well up inside of me. It was miraculous and healing, like all that I had been through didn't matter anymore, and that I was protected. And the healing was so incredible and so amazing that I knew, somewhere inside of me, I knew that my mind after the ceremony would try to talk me out of this, like I was making it all up in my head. So I prayed and I said, "Please, if this is really happening, send me a sign, an external sign, so I don't think I made this up in my head." And as soon as I had that thought, this man knelt before me, and he had a tissue in his hand, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "Here, wipe your tears on this." I started to laugh. I grabbed the tissue, and I wept even more. And I knew at that moment that I was being taken care of. So cut to about a month later, on the day of my wedding, me and my husband decided to have our wedding ceremony with the guru that I lived with. Her name was Amma. And Amma is an Indian guru. She is known as the Divine Mother, actually. So funny enough, Divine Father, Divine Mother. And we were having our wedding ceremony in a really big ceremony that she does called Devi Bhava. And also, ironically enough, it took place all night long into the morning, just like my ayahuasca ceremony. And in the morning, she provides wedding ceremonies for those that would like to do that. And that happens in the morning as the sun peeks over the horizon. And they had us all line up. And my dad showed up, which was a miracle in its own right, but he did. He showed up, and I had asked all my family members and my wedding party to dress in Indian garb. And he had this white traditional Punjabi on. And here's my dad. Let me set the stage. Here's my dad, 5'4", tiny guy, this little Jersey, man with big Coke bottle glasses, totally out of his comfort zone. He was, "Oh, I'm here, Nikki, I'm here. Oh, I'm here." He was so out of his comfort zone. It was very cute. And he looked like he was in these big white pajamas. And we all lined up to get married. And I started to feel extremely overwhelmed. All this emotion started to build up inside of me, and I started to feel faint. And I started to fall. And as I started to fall, my dad caught me. And he wrapped me in his arms. And he held me. And he says to me, "It's okay. I got you. Give it all to me." And in that moment, I started to weep and I started to cry. And he started to weep and he started to cry. And I don't even know if he knew what was going on. And we started to cry all this lifetime and lifetimes of sadness out together. And I cried like I like an eternity. And all of a sudden everything went still. And I felt safe, finally, in my dad's arms. And he looks at me. And he takes the edge of his white Punjabi and he says, "It's okay. Wipe your tears on this." And at that moment, I look up and I say, "No, okay, now you're just showing off." It was the most incredible miracle and experience I've ever had. And I was 27 at the time, and it felt as though the 27 years I didn't feel like I had a father. Everything was mended, and I had that relationship with my dad. And at that moment, we were called on stage, and my dad got to give me away at my wedding. And since then, my dad has showed up for my daughter's birth. He helped us move from California to Florida. And he showed up for me. And I feel like I can honor his process and who he had to be in my life. So I want to share my miraculous story with you. To know that there's hope, that there's healing. And if you need it, you can call upon that Divine Father, because He's there to help you heal. Dad, I love you, and thank you for being there for me. Thank you.